sei qui con me. Questa stanza non ha più pareti, ma alberi.
Thank you very much for a very exciting introduction. And it is an honor for me to talk about the future of education in such a very historical, very special place. And thank you for the previous speakers and the fun introduction talking about philosophy, which is very important for my project, OECD Future of Education and Skills 2030. So my talk will focus on, first, I'd like to give you a very overview of my project, which has been there for a long time, so very short version of the introduction. And then today I would like to focus on the curriculum overload, which is making students suffer and teachers suffer. So there are many, many curriculum issues like politics, which was in the introduction. But I would like to reassure you that the government representatives who gather at the OECD are aware that children should not be the victim of the swinging politics or ideologies. All children need to be valued. So this is where my project comes from. And this is why Alexandra kindly invited me to focus on curriculum overload. And I would first like to share with you the context and also types of pressures that the schools are experiencing around the world. And the good news, examples of some strategies that countries are now undertaking, and also some lessons learned and design principles that were co-created at the global level with a multicultural community. So first, very briefly, my project started back in 2015. And this was the time, if you remember, all of the discussion about artificial intelligence will take over the jobs, and also a lot of terrorism and happening in Paris, unfortunately, as well. So people start to talk a lot about what is the intrinsic human value that can only be progressed by humans, not the artificial intelligence or big data. So that was the year. And first, in phase one, we looked at the big questions, the what questions and big questions, and what kind of competencies, including knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values as well. Competencies are not just skills. Competency is a holistic concept of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that drive the use of knowledge and skills. Thank you. So what kind of competencies today's students need to thrive and also shape themselves a better future themselves? And the second question is, of course, how can these competencies, what kind of competencies can be embedded in the design and redesign of the curriculum? So this is where the curriculum topics come about. The good news is the global community, including students themselves, multi-stakeholders, teachers, school leaders, researchers, NGOs, companies, and the government officials got together and co-created this OECD Learning Compass. Now we are shifted the focus from what questions to how question, which is so difficult. So you're most welcome to join this community and work with us to find the answers to these questions. So how questions include how to design such learning environment where students can thrive and shape a better future themselves, and how to embed effectively those competencies and implement the curriculum. And let's not forget about teachers. Students are important, student agency, student well-being, students, the competencies. But what about teachers? Teachers' well-being, teachers' competencies, and teachers' agency, because student agency and teacher agency are not separable. They are intertwined. So we are currently, once again, co-creating the OECD Teaching Compass to be integrated in the Learning Compass. So this is an open invitation for Italian colleagues to be part of this journey. And since this focus, the morning is focusing on curriculum, I want to go a little bit further about curriculum analysis. And the first curriculum analysis we conducted is about the 21st century curriculum, so-called 21st century curriculum. What students learn today matters for their future. We looked at digital curriculum, cross-curricular competency-based curriculum, flexible curriculum, personal curriculum. But this is another volume, not today's focus. And one more, yes. Another important volume looks at how curriculum can close equity gaps, not enlarge equity gaps. And another important volume is, of course, embedding values into curriculum. This was one of the most contested volume across countries because ideologies matter, politics matter, but we tried to be as evidence-based as possible in this volume. And currently, we are working on curriculum flexibility autonomy, which is a quite contested area too. And finally, next year, we will be publishing ecosystem approach to curriculum design and implementation. So today, one of the most interesting volume is about curriculum overload. So the context, what are the growing demands and impact on students and teachers? So you can see environmental literacy is important. Wow, fake news and media literacy is important. Data, big data. So data literacy, computational thinking, programming, on and on. I couldn't even breathe by listing all of these. And this is happening in school as well. So how to fit them into the limited curriculum space? Because the teachers actually have limited time too. Yes. So for example, back in 2018, this is the international comparison of teaching hours, 2000, and 2005. So teachers' working hours has not changed much, and later, my director will be explaining about the detail about this figure. So I will not go into detail, but my point is teaching hours hasn't changed much. But as you heard, data literacy, media literacy, programming, coding, so all of the demands are coming. So the students are not learning deeper. They may learn more, but it doesn't mean that the students are learning deeper, because the productivity is not matching with the learning hours. So we reviewed international literature, what curriculum overload does to first students. Of course, students have one brain like us, and they need to sleep. They need to make friends. So brain is experiencing cognitive overload when curriculum overload happens. And of course, some students have a high sense of anxiety with the curriculum overload and lack of time to pursue their intrinsic inquiries because there's no time, and lack of sleep. Some students, and I have to say, originally I'm from Asia, Japan, and students often study until midnight, or in Korea, sometimes 1 a.m. after the tutoring. So students do need time to sleep and also do physical exercise, because we know that is good for well-being as well, and lack of time for social interactions and make friends and spend time with the family. So socio-emotional skills are very important as well, and on and on and on. A lot of literature warns us what curriculum overload does to students, but it's the same for teachers as well. So literature says that the teachers are also suffering, because when there's too much to teach, so little time, stretching themselves too thinly themselves, and also lack of time to allow space for students' deeper learning, not more learning, but deeper learning, and competition among yourselves, sometimes among teachers, because math teachers might say, oh, we need more math hours. No, 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 no. physical education teachers say, no, we need more time for physical education. No, students need more art time. So there's a competition which is not healthy among teachers' well-being either. And also teachers also need to finish, and that pressure is not doing any good for students, because if you don't finish your lesson, okay, let's give it as a homework. And literature says students experience not only curriculum overload in school, but homework overload. So we need to find a solution. And the types of curriculum overload, as I said, the one drive is curriculum expansion. Oh, so we need media literacy, data literacy, programming, coding, and financial literacy, consumer literacy. So I receive a lot of emails asking OECD to say, please, Miho, please say consumer education is more important than financial literacy, or media literacy is more important than physical education. So we receive a lot of lobbying emails, but we try to remain as evidence-based. And content overload, as I said, it's not only the expansion of the areas, but the content itself is really becoming more of an issue. And sometimes there's a perception overload. Even when the government reduced the content, teachers continue to believe, oh, it's because of the curriculum. Well, it's not fair for government either. We are all ecosystem. We need to acknowledge what governments are trying to address in some countries and care about the teachers as well. So we also need to work on the perceptions of ourselves. What is curriculum? What do we expect? Why curriculum exists? Students exist, and we should use curriculum for the students, not the other way around. And curriculum imbalance. When there are competition is happening among teachers, among subjects, then you are narrowly focusing on the areas and forgetting about students' deeper learning. So breadth and also the depth is very important. So these are the curriculum over issues. And the good news is some of the countries are aware of this. Like Singapore, for example, had an initiative called Teach Less, Learn More, and trying to relook at the content as well. So let's look at some of the examples how countries are trying to tackle this issue. So one example of the strategy is renewing subject and creating new subject, but it doesn't mean adding more subjects. So somehow refining some subject. And the examples of such is many countries, as listed below, they try to value career education, work study, entrepreneurship education, because that's what students want. And health and well-being and life cycle approach to well-being is articulated in some countries. And environmental education like climate change, COP28, 726, and it's in line with the global trends as well. And the others as well. But again, creating new subject is one thing, but let's already work within the giving curriculum. So interestingly, an example of literacy, so sustainable development, it can be embedded in existing national language or mathematics or humanities or science or technology or arts or PE. So without adding more and more subject like environmental literacy, the subject teachers can actually embed those in the existing subject. And ICT as well. You don't necessarily need to create more and more subject, but you can work around within the curriculum. And another strategy is like the British Columbia, Canada takes is, well, within the knowledge, we can make a distinction of scientific knowledge, humanity knowledge, but the good news is big ideas is quite different from many, many different facts to memorize. And this is just one example of British Columbia, how they really identify big ideas or key concepts of change, culture, form, identity, can be actually can cut across different subjects and be taught differently. So the concept of change coloring and adding different colors. Yes, colors change, but in mathematics, of course, with the equations, change can happen. So different subjects can actually show the concept of change differently, and that allows students to learn the concept of change deeper, not just memorizing. And lessons learned and design principles. So lessons learned is in line with this conference, Schools Without Walls, ecosystem approach. And this is really interesting for the global community, having worked for many. Good advice, speak slow. Yes, thank you. So I am happy that this conference theme is in line with the big theme we have been working on for years. So congratulations for taking the ecosystem approach. So as I said, it's not government versus teachers or student versus teachers, but we are all part of the ecosystem. But let's not forget to put the students in the center. And then at the micro level, teachers, school leaders, you matter as well. And researchers and board of education, edtech companies and NGOs and the government and even the media and laws, everything matters for the students at the center. And traditionally, the curriculum analysis only looked at written curriculum as a document, taught curriculum in the classroom, what you do, and achieved curriculum. So this was really narrow, 3 aspects. But now, as I said, the perceived curriculum also influence teachers and students, but also expected curriculum. What does the society expect? What do parents expect? So we need to be aware of the gap between the expected curriculum. And in some countries, students can decide about the curriculum they learn. So we call it negotiated curriculum. And experienced curriculum aspect. Students experience their learning and school life. That also matters. It's not only what the curriculum says. And evaluated curriculum at the end of the day, is curriculum working good for not only students, but for you teachers, school leaders, researchers, for the society? The evaluation is not only for students, but evaluation is for all of us. And finally, very quickly, but speaking slowly, the design principle. There are 12 design principles the global community often use as a reference. So one is design principle within a discipline. As I said, focus is important to avoid curriculum overload. But focusing does not mean lowering the rigor, lowering the standards. So rigor is important too. And coherence and how students can learn in the right progression and sequencing. And outside of one particular discipline, across different disciplines, teachers should enjoy working together, not competing for the learning hours. So transferability of, as I showed, the big ideas can go across different subjects. Transferability is important, and which puts the interdisciplinarity also. And students can make choices, especially in the higher level of education. Maybe not for early years, but the more students can make an informed decision, they can. And the principles beyond the school is learning should be authentic and relevant for the real world. And the curriculum should be flexible depending on the different students' learning progression and pace of learning. And alignment. So alignment vertically from early childhood, primary, secondary, and alignment also across the different spheres of the students and within the formal education, non-formal education, informal education. And finally, design process of the process itself should be more democratic and should be more engaging students and teachers, and especially students and teachers. And I'll end with one final OECD data, whether the schools seek feedback from students about the school life. And as you can see, Italy has some room. So it's not a criticism, but this is an opportunity. So you can actually ask students more about what they like and what they actually want to do. So please consider this as an opportunity slide, not a criticism, opportunity slide you can make forward in your curriculum. Thank you very much.